All right, let's go back to the section in your essay on cloud seeding. Apart from your silver nitrate, silver iodide mistake, you've missed a few bits out.
Have I?
I'm afraid so. What I'd like you to do is talk me through the process of cloud seeding, what it involves, and so on. And I'll stop you if you've forgotten something, okay?
Fine. Well, first of all, silver iodide is fired into the cloud from the ground using a rocket.
Good. And you could mention that sometimes it's dropped from above by aircraft.
Right. And this is the first stage, the primary stage, which is called static seeding.
Mm-hmm.
The silver iodide causes a chemical reaction with the tiny water drops in the cloud, and they freeze.
Okay, so you've got millions of tiny ice particles because the water droplets in the cloud freeze. What happens next?
Next, there's a process called riming. R-I-M-I-N-G.
Mm-hmm.
That's when the ice particles, they join up to form bigger pieces of ice, and when they're heavy enough, they fall from the sky.
Good. And then?
Well, as they fall, they turn to rain or snow. And, that's it, isn't it?
Well, usually, yes. But you've mentioned that there's a first stage, a primary stage. So surely you should have mentioned...
Oh, the secondary stage.
Which is known as...
Dynamic seeding, of course.
Mm-hmm.
How could I have left that bit out? Let me think. Okay, so the water droplets turn to ice and...
What happens when water freezes? When anything freezes, for that matter? Something that may seem surprising?
Oh, of course. It releases heat.
Mm-hmm, exactly. It releases heat. And what can happen to a cloud when freezing water inside it does this?
The cloud gets bigger and contains even more moisture.
Exactly. And not only do they become bigger, but they also...
They, produce storms. No, hang on, that's not right. They last longer, that's it.
Right. They last longer, which means they can be seeded again to produce even more rain.
But how can you get involved? How can you begin to write articles which will be published on sites like these? Well, first you must have something interesting to say, something you want to communicate with readers. Assuming you have this, it's important in an article to attract people's attention and gain their interest. So put the main facts first, answering these questions: who, why, when, how, and where. Get those basic facts down to start with and get people interested. Then fill in the details in the rest of the article. The best model is really shaped like a pyramid. You put the most important facts at the top of the article and lots of smaller details down below. Remember, you want people to keep reading, so you need to hold your readers' interest. A really good technique for doing that is to put in quotations from people who are part of the story, what they really said. You know the sort of thing. Tanya, mother of two, said, "It all happened so quickly that we didn't have time to react." Quotations bring the article alive. Once you've written your article, go over it again to make sure that any figures you quote are correct. Make sure that Tanya really has 2 children and not 1 or 3. Then, after that, once you've got your ideas down, rewrite your article, making sure that your paragraphs don't contain more than 3 sentences. People like them to be brief and to the point, and this will help to hold their attention. And another thing to bear in mind, if they're reading online, people will soon stop reading your piece and start reading something else. So keep the whole article brief. Don't put in a conclusion. Just let your article end without it. Another good piece of advice is to remember that old cliché which we've all heard, that a picture is worth 1,000 words. It's true, so if you can, include a picture. It'll attract more attention and illustrate what you've been saying. Finally, you need to write a headline. Something eye-catching which will get people to just skim the article to start with, and then, if it's well written, they'll read it more carefully afterwards.
Right. So let's design a plan. What ideas have you got so far?
Well, I wondered about doing something about relationships in the wild first. Maybe starting with animals.
That's quite a good idea. But I think the very first thing you need to do is give a definition of what you mean by your key terms.
Oh, so I need to say what terms like relationship mean?
Yeah. You could just do a diagram, like you do when you brainstorm something.
Oh, yes. Okay, I'll do that first.
Right. After that, you could do a bit of background on the animal world. Yes, a quick look at relationships among ape groups would work.
Yeah, interesting. Just to show that relationships are part of life. So that's the definition and background. What next?
Well, then you have to move on to people. Are you going to target a particular age group or something else?
Well, I thought that first I would look at different... Well, there are so many places, aren't there, where we form relationships? In the office...
Yeah, within the family. Even toddlers aged 18 months or under have relationships.
Yeah, so I'll present those.
You mean the contexts for relationships?
Yes, that's the word.
You do have to find a way to limit the scope of the study.
Yeah, I could examine the 21 to 30 age group.
Or the next thing might be to select one type of relationship and go with that.
Good idea. I'll pick friendship and look at what makes that type of relationship work and...
Well, why don't you go through the stages in a friendship? But I would keep it simple. Just select 6.
6. Okay. I guess I could fit my practical work in here.
Yes. It's the sort of area that you can canvass people's opinions on. It might be good to get some opinions from people over the age of 60.
And, as a contrast, why don't I end by looking into the future? Maybe the future changes in...
Yeah, or better still, the influences, with all the social networking that goes on now.
Okay, influences. Oh, that's been such a help, Victor. Thanks so much.
No problem. I'd better go and get some work done myself.
The Duke of Edinburgh's Award is a programme of activities designed to help young people from all backgrounds develop personally. There are 3 levels: bronze, silver and gold, and for each level, participants have to complete a series of activities in 4 categories: volunteering, physical, skills and expedition. This talk will explain what you have to do in order to get a bronze award. The first thing you need to do is find a Duke of Edinburgh centre near you. This could be your school, college or youth club. Then you'll need to pay a small fee to enrol in the programme. Once you've enrolled, you'll get a welcome pack, which explains the 4 categories in more detail. Then you can start planning what to do. You can do many different types of activity for each category, but you must get them approved by your Duke of Edinburgh coordinator before you start, so you don't waste time doing something which is not approved. The other important person is your assessor. This is the person who will certify that you've completed each activity by signing your record book. After you've completed all the activities in the time given, your assessor will send your record book results to the operating authority, who will check it. If everything is satisfactory, you'll get your certificate and badge to confirm you've completed the award. And after that, you can start working on the Silver Award. Now, the final thing I want to talk about is how to join the Park Hill Leisure Centre and enrol for the classes. First, you need to complete an enrolment form with some of your personal details, including your address and telephone number and the name of your school. If you're under 16 years old, then you'll also be required to get your parents' permission to take part in the classes. Please ask one of your parents to sign the authorisation form attached to the enrolment form. You'll find the form in your information pack. When you've done this, you just hand the forms to reception. You can pay an annual subscription of £20 or, alternatively, you can pay each time you use the facilities. There is a £1.60 admission fee in this case. Whether you decide to pay in one go or with each visit, you still need to complete the forms in your pack and become a member. Once we have the forms, we'll send your membership card to your home address. All you need to do is show this card every time you come to the centre, and if you want to book a class, you just need your membership number on your card. Hi, James. How's your alternative energy research project going?
To be honest, I'm a bit confused about how to do the research for all the different energy types.
Well, the first thing you do is to make sure you focus your question, otherwise you'll have too much to read and you won't be able to select the key arguments.
So how do I do that?
Start with the general topic of alternative energy and then keep asking questions until you've narrowed the topic down to one particular area. Then, when you have your question, make a list of the reading you will need. This list should be general to give you some background, but remember you'll need to focus on the issues related to the question, so the reading list should also be specific to the actual energy source you've chosen, whether it's wind or solar or wave power.
And then start reading?
Absolutely. You need to start straight away, but don't forget to make notes as you read. Otherwise, you won't be able to keep track of ideas for future reference purposes.
Yes, that makes sense. I think that's my main problem. I don't recall where I've read different ideas, so I can't find them again later. And my friends have warned me that not recording ideas in a system can really hinder your progress.
Your friends are right. It's a common problem amongst students. You need a system. Anyway, once you've done the reading and made all your notes, you need to organise them so that you can analyse and think about what you've read.
But I prefer to just start writing and then go back and look at my notes later.
I wouldn't recommend it. I think you need to give yourself more time to digest the material and arrange it into some kind of system ready for analysis in terms of relevance to your research question.
Well, that's a great help. Thank you, Professor Jenkins.
You're welcome. Come and see me again if you have any more problems.
Right, shall we get started on some of the content?
Yes, we haven't got that much time. Does anyone know anything about their topics?
I know quite a lot about cyclones.
Do you?
Well, I studied them at high school. You know, cyclones usually start near the equator. They need quite warm water to form. Above the warm water, the vapour in the air forms clouds, and if there is low pressure, then these clouds will start to rotate.
Isn't it also the fact that the Earth rotates too, which makes the clouds spin more?
Yes, that too. Once they begin rotating, they can either lose momentum or keep gathering momentum until they hit land. These ones are called mature cyclones. Luckily, as soon as they hit land, they start to lose momentum and fade away, just because they don't have the warmth of the ocean underneath.
Well, that's a relief.
They can still be really destructive. They are like a big circle of wind. They blow strongly until the eye of the storm passes, the centre, where everything is really quiet, no wind or anything. But then the other side hits and the winds blow just as strongly, but in the other direction. It's just amazing. Yes, I would really like to cover that.
Well, it looks like we've got it all arranged then.
That is the end of section 3.
Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 13.
Hello?
Hi, it's Laura Carlton here. We've just arrived at the holiday flat, but I can't get the hot water and heating to work.
Oh, right. That's easy. Don't worry. In the upstairs cupboard, you'll find the water heater. You'll see 3 main controls on the left at the bottom of the heater. The first one, the round one on the far left, is the most important one for the heating and hot water. It's the main control switch. Make sure it's in the on position. The switch itself doesn't light up, but the little square below will be black if the switch is off. That's probably what's happened. It's got switched off by mistake. The middle one of these 3 controls, you'll see it's slightly larger than the first one, controls the radiators. If you feel cold while you're there and need the radiators on, this needs to be turned to maximum. The last of the 3 controls, the one on the right, is usually on about a number 4 setting, which for the water in the taps is usually quite hot enough. Below the heating controls in the middle is a small round plastic button. If there isn't enough water in the pipes, sometimes the heater goes out. If this happens, you'll need to press this button to reset the heater. Hold it in for about 5 seconds and the heater should come on again. Then there's a little square indicator under the 3rd knob that's a kind of alarm light. It'll flash if you need to reset the heater.
It sounds complicated.
I'm sure you won't have any problems with it. There should be some more instructions on the side of the heater. Call me back if you can't make it work.
OK.
Now listen and answer questions 26 to 30.
OK, so let's just think about the content of your case study, the history of Furniture Rossi. I see here in paragraph 4, you're talking about how Luca Rossi raised the capital for his new business venture. And then you're talking about the customer base growing much wider. But what was it that prompted this growth?
Well, that was to do with the quality of the furniture products that the company was selling. People loved that it was all handmade and would last.
And because demand from customers kept growing?
Well, then Rossi needed to take on more craftsmen so they could make sure the orders were ready on time. And then he also had to set up 2 new warehouses to make distribution quicker.
Yes, and from there, the company really grew. But think what happened next. They started looking at ways to increase their profits and called in a consultant. And what he saw immediately was that the infrastructure was completely outdated. They were paying 3 full-time admin staff just for data entry. So he recommended they upgrade their software programs, and that, in turn, cut operational costs and just speeded everything up.
I'm surprised they didn't get onto that earlier. But I suppose Luca Rossi was more interested in the design aspect, rather than the finance side of things.
Yes, I imagine that's why he eventually turned the day-to-day running of the company over to his son. And in fact, it was the son, Marco, who persuaded his father to move on from traditional television advertising and go online instead.
I guess that's the best way to reach people.
It can be, but initially customers actually complained.
Why?
Well, some users found it hard to navigate their way around the website, so they were getting frustrated and giving up. So then the company called in a professional to improve it.
Oh, I see. He must have done a good job. They've had a continuous 3-year rise in revenue, so things must be going well.
Indeed. And what of the future?
Well, I probably need to talk about this a bit more in the concluding paragraphs, don't I? Consumers are already aware of the quality of the furniture, that's for sure. But I think the company is aiming to publicise their values. The fact that they have respect for beauty, durability and functionality and the environment. A lot of companies are already...
Now listen and answer questions 27 to 30.
What are the next steps if we are to have a new system?
Well, the first question is, do you have support from your senior management?
Yes, I've already discussed it with them, and they're also keen to get this work done.
OK, because I was going to say that's the first thing you need to do, and without that we can't go ahead.
Yes, I've done that.
That's good.
Actually, they mentioned that there's probably a form I need to complete to formally start the project.
Yes, that's the next thing you need to do. I'll send you an email with a link so you can fill it in online. It's called a project request form.
OK, great. And then what happens?
Well, I have a list of things, but I think the third thing you should do is see Samir. He's our analyst who will look at the system and identify what needs to be done.
OK, can you send me his contact details and I'll set up a meeting with him?
OK, that's good. So we should soon be able to get a team together to start the work. Some members of our team work in different locations, so it's not easy to have face-to-face meetings.
That's OK. I'm used to having conference calls, providing they're not late at night.
Right, so I'll send you details of the team, and if you could set up a call, that would be great.
OK, I'll do that.
Thanks.
Hi, Melanie. What did you think of the assignment that we got today? It looks interesting, doesn't it?
Yes, Ellen. I've always been interested in recycling, but there's a lot of research to do.
Yes, there are a lot of things I'm unsure of, so it's going to be good working with you.
OK. Well, why don't we start by making a flowchart from the notes our tutor gave us?
Yes. So, on one side we could have the paper production cycle, here on the left, and on the other side the recycling.
Good idea. Let's start at the top with the production. The first step in the process is to get the raw materials.
Yes, and they tend to come from pine forests.
OK. And then the bark is removed from the outside of the tree, and after that, the wood is chopped up. That's the first 3 stages.
It sounds a bit complicated after that. It says water is added, and then the mixture is heated and made into pulp. This will be the thick paste that is used to make paper.
Yes, you're right, because after that they use a machine to make the paper, and we can put that right in the centre of the flowchart, because it's also where the recycled paper joins the process.
Yes. So, once the paper has been produced in the machine, what happens then?
Well, I think we should write print as the next step, because this is when newspapers, magazines, etc. are produced. And we could also add that they have to be distributed to stores and people's homes.
Right. Then the recycling bit starts. The old paper's collected, and then it says it's taken somewhere so that someone or something can sort it. I imagine there are different kinds of paper, or things like paper clips that need to be removed.
Yes. Let's have a step after that. Now, how did our tutor say they do this? Oh yes, It involves chemicals. So, how is your chemistry?
Well, not very good, I'm afraid. But this is how they remove ink. So, this is definitely going to need a bit of research.
Right. The last step in the recycling section is similar to the last step in the production process, with heating and pulping, before the cycle begins again.
But let's move on to how floats work. The operational cycle goes like this. Each of the floats is dropped in the ocean from a boat at a set point and activated from a satellite. Then the float immediately sinks about 2,000 metres. That's 2 whole kilometres down in the water. It stays at this depth for about 10 days and is carried around by the currents which operate in the ocean at this level. During this time, it's possible for it to cover quite large distances, but the average is 50 kilometres.
So, what is it actually recording?
Well, at this stage, nothing. But as it rises to the surface, it collects all sorts of data. Most importantly, variations in salinity, that's salt levels, and the changes in temperature, a bit like underwater weather balloons. Then, when it gets back to the surface, all the data it's collected is beamed up to the satellite. After about 5 hours on the surface, the float automatically sinks, beginning the whole process again.
What happens to the data?
Well, the information is transferred direct to onshore meteorological stations, like our one in Hobart, and within 4 hours the findings can be on computers, and they can be mapped and analysed.
Now listen and answer questions 27 to 30.
Well, the first thing is to find out exactly what's required in the exams.
Would it help to get hold of some past papers?
Yes, they'll help to make it clear.
Right, I'll do that. Then what?
Then you can sort out your revision priorities, based on what's most likely to come up. I put these on a card and read them through regularly. But that isn't enough in itself. You also need a timetable to see how you can fit everything in the time available. Then keep it in front of you while you're studying.
I've done that before, but it hasn't helped me.
Maybe you need to do something different every day. So if you break down your revision into small tasks and allocate them to specific days, there's more incentive to tackle them. With big topics, you're more likely to put off starting.
Good idea.
And as I revise each topic, I write a single paragraph about it. Then later I can read it through quickly, and it helps fix things in my mind.
Oh, that's brilliant.
I also write answers to questions for the exam practice. It's hard to make myself do it, though.
Well, I'll try. Thanks a lot, Jeannie. That's a great help.
No problem.
See you around.
Bye.
What about if we analyse the costing process as part of our project?
That's an excellent idea, Phil. OK, so let's imagine that we want to forecast the cost of producing solar energy. How could we do that, Jackie?
Well, I think we'd have to start by working out how many hours of daylight there are in the UK per year.
The Meteorological Office would have data on that.
Then estimate the number of hours of sun to get a rough total.
And then I suppose we'd need to work out how much it would cost to supply the average home with solar power, and then extrapolate that to get a number for the whole country.
Good. And don't forget the price of power conversion stations. This will have a significant impact on overall expenditure. And there's one more factor you haven't taken into account yet regarding the consumers.
Whether they would change from traditional to renewable energy?
No, but think about what might make them change.
Oh, yes. How much they would be willing to pay.
Exactly. Well done. This morning, I'd like to focus on New York as a model for understanding immigration patterns in relation to national rather than international change. Firstly, it is important to understand that migration patterns are primarily affected by the rules of immigration which determine the conditions of entry. After that, internal changes can affect patterns considerably. To highlight my first point, let's study this diagram of Ellis Island and the process of admitting immigrants in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Upon arrival at Ellis Island, people underwent a series of examinations and questions before being allowed to enter the US. First of all, there was a medical inspection to ensure the immigrants were not bringing in any contagious diseases. Anyone who did not pass the medical examination was refused entry to New York and sent home on the next available ship. If the examination was passed, immigrants were required to take a further examination, this time a legal examination to establish whether they had any criminal convictions. After this, immigrants were able to change currency and purchase tickets for onward rail travel from New York. Having completed this simple process, immigrants were told to wait. This wait could be as long as 5 hours before boarding a ferry to take them to New York City. This simple system allowed millions of immigrants to enter the US and is largely responsible for the ethnic makeup of the city today. Even though the immigrants themselves may have had a variety of reasons for deciding to migrate, it was only possible because of US national immigration laws.